It is 7 o'clock. Good to have your company here in Downing Street this morning. And if you have a sense of déjà vu, you're forgiven. We have indeed been here very, very recently. This morning, little more than 7 weeks after she entered number 10 as Prime Minister, Liz Truss will walk out of that famous black door behind me, and Rishi Sunak, the PM-in-waiting, will walk in and begin his premiership. But will he survive until the next election? And just who will be in his top team? On today's programme, the former Justice Minister, Victoria Atkins, has been put forward by Team Rishi, plus the former Environment Secretary, George Eustice, the former Tory party chair, Lord Pickles, the Lib Dem leader, Ed Davey, the SNP's Ian Blackford, and the Shadow Chief Secretary through the Treasury, Pat McFadden. It is Tuesday, 25th of October. Royal seal of approval, Rishi Sunak prepares to meet the King to become the new Prime Minister as he tells his party, unite or die.
We now need stability and unity, and I will make it my utmost priority to bring our party and our country together.
Rishi reshuffle. Jeremy Hunt expected to stay as Chancellor, although no final decisions have been made. Who else could be in line for a top cabinet job? The first British Asian Prime Minister has promised to get to work. We'll discuss what his leadership means for businesses and schools struggling in a cost of living crisis.
Yeah, he's the first Asian Prime Minister and he's from a privileged background, but he really needs to be in touch with his public because we're all now looking to him for results.
One in, one out. The famous black door will swing open for Liz Truss this morning to leave and Rishi Sunak to take over. Will this be the last Prime Minister we have before an election? Morning all. Rishi Sunak will head to the palace to meet King Charles this morning, where he'll be invited to take over a country, but one beset by economic problems, and to build a cabinet from a deeply divided party. He will be the third Prime Minister in 2 months. Do the maths. And there'll be no honeymoon period. As he put it to his own MPs just last night, unite or die. In a moment, we'll be joined by the former Justice Minister, Victoria Atkins, who's been put forward by Rishi Sunak's team. Plus, we'll analyse who might be in line for a top job in his cabinet, with Jeremy Hunt expected to remain as Chancellor, although no final decisions have been made. First, though, let's take you through the key events of the morning. At 9 a.m, outgoing Prime Minister Liz Truss will hold her final cabinet meeting. At 10:15, she's then expected to make a short statement, just a metre away from where I'm standing outside Downing Street. She'll then travel to Buckingham Palace to meet King Charles. After that, the incoming Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, will meet the King for his audience at Buckingham Palace. He'll then travel back here to Downing Street, where we expect him to make his first speech as PM at around 11:35.
He's Britain's youngest Prime Minister in modern times and the first British Asian in number 10. And today, Rishi Sunak embarks on the twin challenges of getting a grip on the economy and uniting the bitterly divided Conservative Party. His message to his MPs, unite or die.
The United Kingdom is a great country, but there is no doubt we face a profound economic challenge. We now need stability and unity, and I will make it my utmost priority to bring our party and our country together.
On the economy, Mr Sunak is expected to keep Jeremy Hunt as Chancellor and press ahead with a plan to balance the nation's books next week. To unite his MPs, he's promised to include talent from across the party in his cabinet. So far, so good.
I take great pride, as somebody who's been a member of the Conservative Party for 35 years, to say the Tory party is back in business.
Mr Sunak became Chancellor in 2020, after just 5 years in Parliament.
I worked alongside Rishi in the Treasury and I saw how incredibly capable he is, clearly his grip of the economic issues, how he knows about the difficult decisions you have to make in government between public spending and public services and taxes.
But many Tory activists, like these in Telford, are furious after being denied a vote in the latest leadership contest.
To foist this upon us without having our say is not going to be accepted by the party, by the grassroots of the party.
We should have had a democratic choice to elect our leader to take the mandate of 2019, the democratically elected mandate of 2019, forward.
When he quit as Chancellor in July, Mr Sunak wrote in his resignation letter it may be his last ministerial job. Now, 7 weeks after being rejected by party members, he's got the top job. John Craig, Sky News.
Very pleased to say the former Justice Minister and, of course, Rishi Sunak supporter Victoria Atkins joins us on the programme. Ms Atkins, lovely to see you. First things first, can we get a guarantee that we're not all going to be back here in a few months' time electing another Conservative leader and Prime Minister?
Yes, because having seen the reception that Rishi got yesterday in the 1922 committee meeting, which is when we all get together as members of Parliament to debate the great issues of the day, the reception Rishi got from across the party was so inspiring to see and also so comforting. When you look at the range of supporters across the party, I think we have a real chance here of uniting. And the reason we want to unite is because we realise the very, very grave issues facing the country.
Indeed.
And all of us, whatever side of the party we come from, all of us want to unite, to work together to deliver for our country and our constituents.
With respect, that's exactly what Liz Truss supporters told me 7 weeks ago today.
Well, I think Liz herself has acknowledged that mistakes were made. They went too far, too fast with some of the measures that were announced. I desperately wanted Liz to succeed. I'm a Conservative. I also want to deliver for my constituents. But I think now that we've seen the reaction of the markets, and also there has been a much greater debate as to the precariousness of the world economy as well as our own domestic economy, I think and I'm convinced, given the reaction of members of Parliament yesterday and the unity that people showed in uniting behind Rishi, that we will be able to move forward. We're elected by our constituents to deliver, and we want to do that.
I mean, presumably you're not talking about people like Nadine Dorries, who says a general election is now necessary. Presumably you're not talking about another MP, Sir Christopher Chope, suggesting that Rishi Sunak supporters are hyenas. Certainly not Mr Campbell Bannerman, who tweeted a picture last night of a snake on the doorstep of Number 10 with Rishi Sunak's face. This doesn't strike me as a party in the throes of unity.
No, I mean, the last chap you mentioned just then isn't a member of Parliament, but
no, he was a former MEP.
There are going to be. Look, we understand this is it's been a very, very tough 6 weeks for us as a party. Of course, the country would be saying, well, hang on a minute, it's been a very tough 6 weeks for us as well, which is why I think, of course, there will be some bruised feelings amongst some people. But actually what we saw yesterday was the overwhelming majority of people coming together, understanding that we now have to focus on tackling inflation, we have to stabilise the markets, we have to try to help the Bank of England with the difficult decisions they have coming ahead of them with interest rates and so on. We have to do everything we can to stabilise the economy, because if we can do that, then we can start to deliver the vision that Rishi set out over the summer and that we will all look forward to supporting when there is a general election.
Sure. There will, however, be people watching this morning who do not simply believe what you say because of the destabilising effect that the Conservatives have latterly had on the economy. So just in terms of policy, what is Rishi Sunak going to do to deal with that £40-odd billion black hole as identified by pretty much every financial commentator I can find?
Well, the first, I'm very, very conscious that we need to regain people's trust. And so Rishi, being the former Chancellor that he is, don't forget he set up the furlough scheme, had to deal with the nightmare of the COVID pandemic within a month of becoming Chancellor. He managed it superbly and set up
we know all of that.
What
is he going to do about the black hole?
So in terms of the black hole, he will be getting to work immediately with the Chancellor to address these issues. You'll appreciate I'm not in the room with them in those discussions.
Indeed.
But my goodness me, we have someone in office who doesn't need lessons in how the Treasury works or whatever. He will absolutely get on with the job as soon as he walks through that great big black door.
Sure, but are there areas that should be protected? The health service, for example, the 3% on defence spending?
Well, we, again, Rishi has said that we stood and won an election in 2019 on that manifesto, and he wants to stick to that manifesto. And that seems to me absolutely the right way forward. And so we're committed, completely committed to the NHS. We know that this winter is going to be a very difficult one for a whole host of reasons, not least the backlogs that accumulated during as a result of the pandemic, but also with defence. He's been very, very clear that, for example, we will continue to do everything we need to do, not just to defend our country, but also to help Ukraine in particular, which, of course, that dreadful war in Ukraine
Sure.
is some of the reason for some of the economic turmoil that the whole world is seeing as a result of energy prices escalating.
But we are going to be entering into, aren't we, a period of austerity, and it will be a period of austerity in which we have a Prime Minister who, via marriage, is a billionaire. So when Rishi Sunak stands up and says that there isn't going to be any money to give nurses to put their salaries up, that there isn't going to be money to pay for school repairs or perhaps even some COVID-compliant ventilation going on in there, it will be a billionaire saying so. How do you think the public will react to that?
So if I can just step back a little bit from that, because as I say, it wouldn't be right for me to appear, even by inference, to confirm what you're saying in that question. I think we've got to give Rishi and the Chancellor a bit of time and space to work out the plans. Where Rishi very much wants the A statement to go ahead on the 31st of October, but decisions will be made on that. We've got to take this step by step. In terms of how Rishi speaks to the public, communicates with the public, relates to the public, I think we saw it again in the pandemic. I'm not asking you to imagine that he's good at this. We know he's good at this because we've seen it as we were all huddled around our televisions during lockdown and were reassured by Rishi saying, this is what I'm going to do for you. We're going to put our arms around you. And so I'm very, very confident that we will see more of Rishi in that mode, if you like, reassuring us, stabilising the markets. And it is notable, by the way, the reaction of the markets over the last 24 hours. I think that, again, gives us some small grounds for optimism. And so I think stabilising the markets, tackling inflation, because as Rishi said throughout the summer, that is the killer with a lot of this. If we've got food inflation, if we've got wage inflation, these are all difficult issues. And Rishi has the experience and the expertise to deal with this.
All of which makes whoever he puts around the cabinet table with him incredibly important, particularly, of course, the job in number 11. He's talked about building a government of all the talent. What do you understand him to mean by that? I mean, are we basically now going to be about to see a member of the ERG sitting around the cabinet table?
Well, look, I think we have an enormous range of talents across the party. I'm not going to name names, if you'll forgive me, because I don't want to make enemies at 7 o'clock in the morning. But by the
fair enough.
Out. Yeah. But we have a huge range of talent across the party, and I think one of the sadnesses of perhaps the last 6 weeks was that not all of that talent was really used and really exploited, if you like, by the previous administration. So I'm really looking forward to some excellent colleagues, and we've got a huge range of experience in teaching, police, and so on across the board. I'd love to see some of that expertise and experience come into our government, so that we're shaping policies and delivering policies that really make a difference for our country.
Make the case then, if you can, for the country not being given a vote on what is, the third Prime Minister we've had in, a handful of months. Why is now not the right time? I mean, you've gone through the decision-making process now twice internally within the Conservative Party. Yeah. By your own admission, you got it wrong the first time. You're keeping your fingers crossed on this one. I mean, why not?
A little more than that, Neil. Forgive me, a little more than that. I'm very confident about this administration. In terms of the mandate, I think there are two primary reasons. First of all, it's completely practical, which is my goodness me, we have got a lot to deal with at the moment. We have to stabilise the markets. We have to stabilise the economy. We have to ensure, for example, that the energy price guarantee that Liz introduced, that's a phenomenal package.
I mean, that would make sense. That would make sense.
We've got to deliver.
Sorry, that would make sense if the first thing
And
that
then
Rishi Sunak said to his MPs was not unite or die. I mean, this is all about the existential crisis that the Conservative Party is facing. It's nothing to do with the country.
No. And the second reason, if I may, for the question about an election, and forgive me, this is a bit of sort of constitutional law in the middle of the beginning of the morning for people who've just woken up. But we elect a party. You know, it's a Conservative manifesto in 2019. We don't have a presidential system, and I am responsible and I am representative of my constituents, but I'm also accountable to them. So we stood on that manifesto, we deliver it, and of course in Parliament it is the...
Liz Truss did not deliver the 2019 manifesto.
Who can command a majority, and His Majesty the King will invite that person to deliver a government. Look, I think Liz would accept that she stepped away from the 2019 manifesto. There were particular policy issues.
That's my point. Why should we now believe you that Rishi Sunak will not? I mean, we've literally just the last Prime Minister that was in post for 7 weeks said exactly the same thing. You know, here's my plan, put it to the country. But so what's the difference? I mean, you've already shown that the Conservative Party cannot be trusted to the 2019 manifesto commitments with the current Prime Minister.
Because Rishi said we will stick to the 2019 manifesto. It's as simple as that. So, we will continue to see the focus on levelling up. We'll continue to see the focus on the NHS, on security. My own personal area of sort of expertise and interest, if you will, is supporting tackling violence against women and girls, supporting victims of domestic abuse and so on. We want to continue all of these pieces of work as we deal with this very, very difficult issue of our domestic economy in the context of the international problems that other countries are facing as well. So, look, I appreciate that it's been a it's been a brutal 6 weeks in politics for lots of people. It's been a very, very fast pace. But we now, behind Rishi, will have a stability and confidence and reassurance that I hope will begin to make a real difference to people's lives over the coming weeks and months.
I know I've got to let you go, but I can't let you go without this cheeky little question at the end. Have you got a job?
No. Well, other than submitting myself to your cross-examination at 7 o'clock in the morning. There we go.
Yeah, indeed. OK. Victoria Atkins, lovely to have you on the programme. Take care.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Joining us here in Downing Street all morning, our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen. Tamara, of course, Victoria Atkins, put forward by CCHQ this morning. She is the representative of Rishi Sunak. What did we make of what we heard?
Well, is it going to be third time lucky, essentially, for the Conservatives? We're here 7 weeks to the day since Liz Truss walked in, on another drizzly day in Downing Street, Boris Johnson having gone that morning, and now we're going to be doing it all again this morning with Rishi Sunak, who lost the contest despite winning the support of most of his colleagues, including Victoria Atkins, who was one of those cast out into the cold by Liz Truss for not supporting her. And she was suggesting there that Rishi Sunak would not just talk about a government of all the talents, which all governments do, but actually do it, actually bring in people who didn't agree with him, who didn't necessarily support him, in order for the party to, what he said to his colleagues yesterday was unite or die. They can all see the polls, they can all see where they are, and he says we have to now crack on with, as she put it, tackling inflation and the rising cost of living. And the crucial first decisions will be today on who he puts in his top team.
Well, shall we play a little bit of early morning cabinet bingo? Where should we start? Well, how about with the post of Chancellor? At the moment, of course, Jeremy Hunt. It would be difficult for him to move, wouldn't it?
The strong expectation is that Jeremy Hunt stays, and one of the reasons for that is obviously he has the market's confidence, but he's supposed to deliver that statement, the fiscal statement on how to balance the books, next Monday the 31st. It'd be difficult for someone else to get up to speed on that. So that's our strong expectation. We also think that he might bring back some of those figures who are not in cabinet at the moment, the likes of Sajid Javid, of course, former health secretary and former lots of other things as well in a key post. Kemi Badenoch was a supporter of Liz Truss in the end, having run herself, big figure on the right of the party.
I can see her staying at international trade.
I can see her staying at trade. There's suggestions that she doesn't like trade and wants a more forward-facing position.
They all do, don't they?
Penny Mordaunt, she, of course, was in the running until the last few minutes yesterday, refused to make a deal with Rishi Sunak.
She said she was in the running.
Insisted that she was going to get to the 100 MPs. Having not made a deal, she is now, we understand, pressing to be Foreign Secretary. Will he give her that big reward?
Which involves getting rid of James Cleverly, though, doesn't it?
Of course, and you'd think, even though James Cleverly supported Boris Johnson in this round of the contest, he's seen as a safe pair of hands at the Foreign Office. So will Penny Mordaunt be offered something else, and will she take it, or will she stay outside the tent? James Cleverly, Foreign Secretary, he may well stay in a gesture of reaching out to other Boris Johnson supporters. Grant Shapps, been Home Secretary for 5 minutes, about a matter of days. He is a supporter of Rishi Sunak, but there are suggestions that some of Rishi Sunak's other supporters, even someone like Dominic Raab, who has really done some heavy lifting in the media for Rishi Sunak, he might be rewarded with that job. So will be a move there. He will, it looks like, bring in some of the right-wingers in the party, like Suella Braverman, recently liberated from the Home Office.
Presumably she was offered something for her support.
Well, she wrote a very effusive article in the Telegraph about Rishi Sunak, which suggested that. So she will be offered, we assume, something. Difficult to bring her back to the Home Office after she resigned over a security breach, 100%. So perhaps a different job, justice, as she is a lawyer. Mel Stride, big supporter of Rishi Sunak, ran his leadership campaign, is likely to get something. And Oliver Dowden, another figure from the last cabinet, also a big Rishi supporter. We expect he may get a role. And the former Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, tipped for a return, as well as Ben Wallace. Will he be kept as Defence Secretary?
This is the interesting one for me, because he supported-ish Boris, has been very firm on the 3% GDP spending on defence, well, up until relatively recently.
Well, that's interesting. He was putting about the idea that he would resign if there wasn't an increase in defence spending to 3%, and that's why he supported Liz Truss, because she was promising that. But I was hearing over the last few days sources close to Ben Wallace saying that is not exactly what he said. So would he stay in defence with a smaller settlement, or would he, in that situation, say, no, I'm going to go? And Michael Gove, could it be the ultimate comeback for Michael Gove? There are plenty of difficult jobs to do in government, and I'm sure he would happily take on any of them.
I'm absolutely certain that you're right. Tamara, thank you very much indeed. So let's have a quick look, shall we, at how some of the papers are covering the wider reaction to Rishi Sunak becoming leader. You can put that down now, the rain's off. In the Times, the headline, Sunak tells the Tories, unite or die. Meanwhile, the Mirror asks, who voted for you? Stating that Rishi Sunak takes power without winning a single vote, as people across the country call for a general election. The Telegraph, well, it says that Rishi Sunak's crowning moment was like the X Factor, except nobody actually voted for the winner. Interesting take by Tim Stanley. According to the Mail, however, the new Prime Minister heralds a new dawn for Britain. Alternative take in the Star, it pictures the third Prime Minister this year as October's calendar boy and asks, will he last until the end of the month? We'll find out in a few days, won't we? Still to come on the programme, at 20 past roughly, I'll be speaking to the former chairman of the Conservative Party, Lord Pickles. We'll also be speaking to a head teacher about the possible impact of spending cuts on schools' budgets. And we'll also be getting reaction from the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Pat McFadden, as Rishi Sunak secures the keys to number 10. But some other news now. And Russia says it will take its claims that Kyiv is preparing to use a radioactive dirty bomb to the UN Security Council later today. Now, the West fears the Russian claims could be the pretext for a further escalation of the war. Our Europe correspondent Adam Parsons asked Ukraine's top security official whether he thinks Russia will use a dirty bomb and try to blame it on Ukraine.
Ви знаєте, росіяни можуть зробити все, що завгодно. Те репетування, які сьогодні відбуваються з боку Росії, кажуть про те, що вони до цього готувалися і були готові. І заяви, що нібито ми цим питанням можемо займатися, я можу дати дуже просту відповідь. Ну і ми би точно цими питаннями не займалися. Ми ж не Корея, не Іран і не Росія.
Speak to Adam, who joins us now from Kyiv. Adam, very good morning. I mean, at this distance from Ukraine, people are genuinely concerned when the Russians start talking about dirty bombs. I can only imagine what it's like where you are.
Yeah, I think there is, here in Ukraine, a sort of certain stoicism. They've heard so much and so many threats and seen so much violence in their country over the past 8 months or so that this is just another one to add to the list. But I think the response that you have seen, not just from Alexei Danilov and from Volodymyr Zelensky to these claims of preparing a dirty bomb, but also from officials in UK and Washington, Paris and beyond, probably speaks volumes. I mean, the simple fact is that nobody, no diplomat thinks that there is any chance that Ukraine is going to A, possess a dirty bomb, and B, use it on its own territory with the expectation that somehow Russia would get the blame for it. I mean, there are so many dots there, it's almost sort of risible. I mean, when we talk about a dirty bomb, we're talking about a high explosive bomb with radioactive material around it. It's not the same as a nuclear bomb. Although, of course, that threat still lingers in the air. And when we spoke to Mr. Danilov, I also asked him about that. And his response was pretty much along the lines of whatever Russia does, we will cope with it. Russia, of course, still maintains that Ukraine is preparing some sort of dirty device. I don't think that's reality. I think this is about PR and manoeuvres and some kind of diplomatic strategy that the Russians are preparing. There are those who think it could be laying the ground towards a proposal of a ceasefire here in Kyiv. I don't think they would take it.
Adam, many thanks. Now, it's claimed that rising bills are pushing more households onto prepayment gas and electricity meters. The comparison website USwitch says that 60,000 new meters were installed in Britain in the 6 months to March. Some suppliers put customers on prepayment meters if they struggle to keep up with their bills. The United States has charged 2 suspected Chinese spies with attempting to obstruct a criminal investigation into the Chinese tech giant Huawei. The 2 men are accused of paying tens of thousands of dollars in cash and jewellery to bribe a US law enforcement official. The person they tried to recruit was, in fact, a double agent working for the FBI. Harvey Weinstein is back in court on further charges of rape and sexual assault. The disgraced film producer is facing 11 charges of rape and sexual assault between 2004 and 2015. Sad one, this. The actor Leslie Jordan has died in a car crash at the age of 67. The Will and Grace star was known for his somewhat distinctive Southern American accent, his viral videos made during lockdown, and, of course, his character's distinctive way of entering a room.
Well, well, well. Well, well, well. Well, well, well. Well, well, well.
Now, speaking at a Diwali celebration last night, the US President Joe Biden called Rishi Sunak's appointment as the UK's first British Asian Prime Minister pretty astounding.
Just today, we've got news that Rishi Sunak is now the Prime Minister. As my brother would say, go figure. And the Conservative Party expected to become the Prime Minister, I think, tomorrow when he goes to see the King. Pretty astounding. A groundbreaking milestone, and it matters. It matters.
Rishi Sunak will, of course, become the 3rd Prime Minister this year, and many people are demanding a general election. But as Tom Parmenter found out in Leicestershire, others just want him to get on with the job.
They want everything just right here, because it's tough selling electrical goods to a cash-strapped public.
Good afternoon, Halls.
Alison runs the accounts here.
You don't see so many people about. Nobody dare spend. Nobody dare spend anything.
And that's all down to the political situation?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, they just need to sort it all out.
Struggling to get hold of stock?
With some things, yeah, it's difficult.
Chris's granddad started this business in the 1930s. Alongside his electricals, they're trying out a toy shop. Anything to change their fortunes as the Prime Minister changes again.
It affects everybody in the UK. It does, everybody. And that's what they need to stop and think about. We must be the laughingstock of the political world.
We watched in the shop as it was all confirmed.
As long as he gets on with the job now and tries to sort things out, that's really what matters.
And whichever way your corner of the country votes, this cuts through every community.
You hear that frustration in cities, towns, villages, even hamlets here in rural Middle England. People have been embarrassed by the circus in Westminster, and quite often they've suffered because of it.
The day when the country found out it would have its first British Asian Prime Minister coincided with this.
Happy Diwali to all!
When he succeeded today, even to the last moment, I was thinking, oh, no, he's not going to make it, But then when he did it, it just blew me out.
Leicester always hosts one of the biggest Diwali parties outside of India. It drew Rita here from Essex.
There's people out there that are really, really struggling, and obviously he's had a bit of a privileged lifestyle. I think he needs to kind of be in touch. Yeah, he's the first Asian Prime Minister and he's from a privileged background, but he really needs to be in touch with his public, because we're all now looking to him for results.
And that's the point. The people now living in Sunak's Britain won't accept just more of the same. Tom Parmenter, Sky News, Leicestershire.
Well, let's put some of the points in Tom's report to the former Conservative Party chairman, and of course, former Communities and Local Government Secretary, Eric Pickles. Now, of course, Lord Pickles. Lovely to see you this morning. Rishi Sunak will very, very soon be off to see the King. Was this the result you were after?
I voted for him in the summer, so I'm quite pleased to see him there. No disrespect, of course, to Liz, but I think he had a very good grasp of what we need to do, and I wish him well.
What is the first task that a new Prime Minister, particularly one who is not entering Downing Street after a general election, what is the first task that they have to do? Is it to reach out to the public, or is it to steady the internal struggles that the party's been going through?
I don't think it's a binary choice. I think there are a number of things that they need to do. I mean, obviously, he recognises that he needs to ensure that the Conservative Party comes together. He needs to ensure that there's going to be a balanced cabinet and that people are appointed on merit rather than just rewarding mates. There's got the economic. He's got to be very clear in terms of his fiscal and economic policy. And he's got to put across a very clear set of policies. I've not been entirely sure what the Conservative Party stood for a number of months, and I think that needs to be got across very clearly to the public. And I think above all, he's got to ensure that Downing Street works. For the last three Prime Ministers, it's been largely dysfunctional. I think it's and almost been an impediment to good government.
But in your kind of former role as party chairman, I mean, you know a thing or two about party discipline and how to keep it. And it strikes me that at the moment there are any number of people who are at the very least slightly annoyed with Rishi Sunak. I mean, the party membership, as you saw in Tom's report there, a large chunk of them will be feeling marginalised by the fact that they didn't get to have a say in all of this.
I kind of understand that, but you know, this isn't a game. This isn't student politics. It's about forming a government, and we need a government very quickly. And I think it might have been self-indulgent even to waste a week to have a competition that had been largely settled by the Member of Parliament. I understand that's a fairly brutal thing to say, but I do think it's important that we get on with the job. But you see, I think part of the problem is that there's been too many chief whips who saw themselves as Francis Urquhart, and have tried to impose the discipline. I mean, whips need to understand.
I mean, you may say that.
Actually,
I couldn't possibly comment.
Yeah, that's very good. Good pun. But I mean, they've got to kind of realise that the days in which a member of Parliament trembled if the chief whip rang his association chairman or her association chairman is long over. The whips have no power. So what they've got to do is make people want to go through the lobbies with them. What they've got to do with the general party is to offer some leadership, not by threats or by pushing people through into lobbies, but by actually getting some enthusiasm together in terms of how we want to help the British public and put some policies through, for goodness sake.
But what do you do to quell the growing calls for a general election? They're obviously most prominent from the opposition benches, but you do also have people like Nadine Dorris suggesting that actually, given what has happened over the past 3-4 months, you know, putting it to the country might not be a bad idea.
Well, so far as I understand the British Constitution, and I am claiming I do completely, is if you can command a majority in the House of Commons, you can form a government, and it's as simple as that. I mean, I understand a number of colleagues, or former colleagues have said that. Well, if they want to seek the Chiltern Conference, I would enthusiastically go out and canvass for them if they sought re-election.
You've yourself, have, of course, been very keenly involved in a number of Conservative elections. I'm just wondering if you were kind of advising the Sunak team at the moment. We are, of course, in the middle of a cost of living crisis. Everyone has less money in their pockets these days. There are going to have to be some very, very big, difficult decisions made on public spending. And they're all going to be being announced by a guy who, through marriage, admittedly, is a billionaire. I mean, how do you counteract the optics of a situation in which a man richer than Croesus is telling nurses that they can't have an extra tenner a week?
I mean, I'm sure he's very aware of that, but I don't think we should look down our noses at somebody just because they've got a bob or two.
More than a bob or two, come on.
You've got well, a large bob or two, if that would make you happy. But what you've got is a man, I think, who's capable of walking other people's shoes. I think he does have empathy, and time will tell. But I think he's a very competent guy, and I wish him well.
I suppose then that the final question should be, I mean, if it doesn't go well, if he doesn't steady the ship, if he doesn't, you know, deal with the economy in a way in which the market's like, I mean, Rishi Sunak has a shelf life, doesn't he?
Every politician has a shelf life. I think people need to understand, no matter how important you are, you're essentially, in politics, you've got a summer lease. You're there for a while and then you're gone. But I think there's more at stake here than the fate of Rishi Sunak. It's the fate of the nation, and in a really difficult time. You had a brilliant report there about what's going on in the Ukraine. There's instability in the world. We've got to offer the Conservative Party, and Mr. Sunak has got to offer leadership right across this, and to try and bring us through these difficult problems.
Eric Pickles, Lord Pickles, I should say, great to have you on the programme. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Now, eagle-eyed viewers may have already seen Larry the Cat has been out this morning on the hunt for the next cabinet appointments. We'll be going through who might be in line for those in much more detail with you again in the next hour with Tamara. And of course, Liz Truss will be holding her final cabinet here at 9 a.m. So we'll be hoping that some of them might want to talk to us as they're arriving. I think we've got more chance with the cat, frankly. Head teachers, though, are warning that 9 out of 10 schools will be running out of money by the next academic year if there isn't more funding. But as soon as next week, the new government is expected by many to bring in spending cuts across all departments. Joining us now, Simon Kidwell, Vice President of the National Association of Head Teachers, and indeed a head teacher himself. Simon, great to have you on the programme. Just tell us about the situation that you are facing at the moment, and indeed those of your members.
So currently, we're actually facing a £2 billion shortfall by the end of this Parliament. So for my own individual school, that means we're approximately £80,000 down from what we set our budget to, which relates to 2 teachers or 4 teaching assistants. So we're facing significant staff reductions unless we can actually get the £2 billion that was promised in the 2019 manifesto.
So why are these pressures? Why are these pressures emerging at this point? Is this all related to cost of living? I mean, I imagine your energy bills are through the roof.
It's partly cost of living, but it's also we had an unfunded pay rise. So the pay rises which have been earmarked for teachers and teaching assistants aren't funded at all. So that's causing additional pressure, as well as cost of living pressures like energy and food bills.
So when will you have to make a decision on whether or not to cull staff?
Well, this year we've got a capital budget where we were looking to refurbish a toilet block in schools. We are putting that on hold at the moment, so we may be able to get through this financial year, but the following financial year is where we were looking at staff reductions. And if you look at that across the whole country, we're looking at a reduction of 38,000 teachers if we don't get the £2 billion, which was promised in the 2019 manifesto.
I mean, the government, of course, it is in a state of flux at the moment, but the government would say that it is facing a crisis at the moment and that it is already pumping money into education. I mean, a DFE spokesman said this: "We understand that schools are facing cost pressures due to international events driving up energy prices." She added that as well as the energy relief scheme, schools would receive £53.8 billion in core funding, which includes, they say, a cash increase of £4 billion. I mean, it's not enough for you, is it?
No, those figures are accurate, but what we didn't have when we had those funding agreements at the start of this Parliament, we didn't know the cost of living crisis was going to happen. So we heard from Lord Pickles previously about global instability, but I would say to the Prime Minister, we really need to make sure that we don't put instability into our schools. Our schools are really on a knife edge, and so many organisations are speaking out. We've got CEOs of large academy trusts, we've got the people that signed the letter that went to the Conservative MPs. We really don't want to be putting this level of instability into our schools, because it means our schools won't look like they have done over the last 10 years.
I mean, 50%, as it says on the screen there, 50% of head teachers saying their school will be in deficit this year. So let's be absolutely direct about this. Rishi Sunak is the new Prime Minister, well, will be shortly. What do you need to see from him and Jeremy Hunt?
Well, we need to see that recommitment. They talked about unity and unifying the party around 2019 manifesto promises. So if they are going to unify the party, we know that local MPs, that schools are very dear to their heart, and they need to find that money. And they need to see schools as an investment in the future. The £2 billion we're looking for is about 6 miles of HS2 railway. So we really do need to stop looking at schools as a burden on the public purse and start saying it's an investment for the future if we put money into children and their futures.
Well, Simon, we wish you well with those efforts. Simon Kidwell, many thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
But pressure is also building on the government to increase the number of free school meals to help the poorest families struggling with the rising cost of living. I'm joined now by Maureen Bigg, a former teacher who currently volunteers in a school in London. Maureen, lovely to talk to you. Just tell us about what you see on a daily basis in your school.
So I come from a family of teachers. My brother's a teacher, my sister's a teacher, my friends, my sister-in-law, everybody. So it's not just about what I've seen, but it's also about stories that I'm hearing from across the country, actually. I recently tweeted about one particular incident of a student in one of the schools that I volunteer in. And one of our students nearly passed out from hunger. And immediately the teacher I was with took out 2 apples and gave her 2 apples. And she took one of them and she put it into her bag for her sibling to have when she goes home that day. There are kids who, people are sharing their stories on social media with me now, and there are kids who are collecting sachets of tomato ketchup, hoping to make tomato soup at home. There are kids who are wrapping up leftovers in tissues secretly to take home for dinner. There are kids who are pretending to eat out of empty lunchboxes because they're not only hungry, but they're embarrassed and ashamed. And this isn't, it's not about one isolated incident. This is happening across the country. I started teaching in 2011. So my teaching career correlated with a decade of austerity. And I was teaching in a particularly disadvantaged borough in London, and it was very normal for us to use our own money to buy food for our students. But what's becoming really evident now is that this is a story which is not just happening in some of our deprived areas. This is happening across the country. There are 800,000 students, I think, children who are suffering from food insecurity and child poverty, who are skipping meals, and they're not entitled to free school meals. This is now a widespread issue.
Just on that topic, and Maureen, a lot of this story resonates with me because, again, I'm from a family of teachers. Both of my parents are teachers. They had pastoral responsibility, and I remember them talking about doing exactly what you were doing. But why are so many kids, let's just explain this for our viewers, why are so many kids not qualifying for free school meals when clearly they are in need of them?
Because the cost of living crisis now is affecting not just the poorest people in the country, it's affecting, it's going through all layers of society with energy bills increasing, rent prices and everything going up. Families are struggling. So it's not just the poorest people in society now who are struggling to keep up with the demand. That people's income is not covering basic key living costs. Parents are having to make decisions of whether they're going to have heating in their house, whether they're going to keep a roof over their child's head or whether they're going to feed them. And that genuinely is the reality. And actually, like I say, when I put this out, one of the stories out on social media, I was so taken aback, not just by how widespread the problem is, but also at the ignorance that surrounds it. A lot of people say, well, someone needs to teach these parents to budget, but you can't budget with money that you don't have.
So, Maureen, just briefly then, because we're just about to run out of time, what then does Rishi Sunak on day one of his spell in number 10? What does he need to do to deal with, starving kids in schools? I can't even believe I'm saying this in the 21st century.
It's shocking to even be saying it. We are, the sixth richest country in the world, and our children are hungry. What I'd say to Rishi Sunak is that between all of these leadership battles and political chaos, the needs of children and schools and education and teachers has been ignored. And that should be the priority of any civilized country. We need to invest in education. We need to invest in young people, or we're going to face the consequences of that for years to come. So I hope Rishi Sunak uses some of his £730 million net worth to combat child poverty and feed starving children across the country.
Maureen, great to talk to you. Thanks so much for your input. Now, there are new figures out this morning on the cost of living and the price increase in everyday goods. Matthew Thompson is at a preschool club for us in North London. Matthew, tell us, what are we finding out?
Some pretty striking statistics from the ONS today, Neil, showing that the lowest cost items in supermarkets have risen considerably more in the last year in price than the headline inflation rate. So the lowest cost items in supermarkets have risen 17%, as against, of course, headline inflation of 10%, but we also know that food and drink inflation is a little bit higher than that, 15%. But what it shows quite clearly is that lower cost items, which of course tend to be bought by lower paid people, rise quicker in price than others. And it adds to a number of comments and research in the last year or so done by people like Jack Monroe, who I'm sure you'll be familiar with, who have pointed out that quite often when inflation is rampant, it is the people on lowest incomes who are hit harder by it. And if you look at just some of the individual items that the ONS looked at, they're really quite striking. So vegetable oil, for example, rose 65% in price in the last year. Pasta rose by 60%. Tea rose by 46%. And now clearly we should be clear about it. Large percentage increases of low cost items are still low cost, But they do compare extraordinarily, those figures, 65%, 46%, as I say, to headline inflation of 10% and food and drink inflation of 15%. So again, what we know is that inflation tends to hit those who are already finding it hard to cope with energy bills, heating bills, whatever else it may be. They buy lower cost items in the shops, and the data shows those lower cost items rise quicker in price.
Matthew, thanks very much indeed. I'll just get my producer to move his big head out of the way there, and let's have a quick look at Rishi's entry. And like my producer's head, it's a big one. He needs to make an immediate decision over the medium-term fiscal plan, details of which are due to be released on the 31st of October, following on from September's disastrous mini-budget. The new PM will have to decide if that date is still feasible. He'll also face pressure to address the energy crisis as winter fast approaches. Similarly, he'll have to tackle the cost of living crisis and work out how to proceed with the Northern Ireland Protocol and also maintain the UK support for Ukraine. Well, let's bring in Tamara Cohen at this point, and someone we've not really been talking about this morning, but we should probably reflect on them. Liz Truss. I mean, we saw a glimpse of it when she announced her resignation. I imagine we might see it again today, but this will have affected her massively.
Absolutely. Liz Truss is chairing her final cabinet meeting today. Not quite sure what the point of it is, but she will be saying farewell to those around the top table, many of whom will be leaving their positions at the top table today. She gave an 89-second resignation speech last week, not really reflecting on where she went wrong. She said, I can't deliver the mandate I was elected to deliver by Conservative Party members.
You're not expecting that this morning, are you?
I'm fascinated by what she will say today. Will she say any more about how she got it wrong? Will she talk about regrets? She seems to be somebody who is not keen to show much emotion, to show much of what is inside. But, you know, this is 7 weeks as Prime Minister, our shortest-lived Prime Minister ever. This is obviously a personal tragedy for her, and many would say the country, who are seeing the effects of the mini-budget in their day-to-day lives. But she is not widely expected to be given a cabinet job. Who knows if she actually wants one? But what happens to her as one of our shortest-lived former Prime Minister? What she goes on to do? Will she write her memoirs? Will she make any big interventions on any subjects? Her economic policy lies in tatters. That is, you know, it's, as a final day of Liz Truss's premiership, it will be fascinating, I think, to see what she has to say about it.
Tamara, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's reflect on what we just heard from Tamara. 3rd PM this year, a 5th in 6 years. Does the Constitution need a shake-up, or is Parliament simply not measuring up? Let's speak to the political historian, Sir Anthony Selden. Sir Anthony, lovely to see you again. First and foremost, what do you make of the fact that Rishi Sunak is soon to be the next Prime Minister?
Well, I think it's good for the markets, good for the country, therefore, that we have a proven Prime Minister who is known to be sensible, understands economics and finance, but also understands the politics of it all, which his two predecessors didn't. Boris Johnson didn't understand public finances, always wanted to spend more. And Liz Truss might have had some very good ideas, but had no sense of timing. In Rishi Sunak, as we can see from the markets, there's somebody in who they and business have confidence. And that's above all what we need from the Prime Minister at, as we've just heard on your programme, a very perilous time, in some ways the worst inheritance since 1945. We tend to exaggerate, and we always say that an incoming Prime Minister has the worst inheritance since William the Conqueror, but it really is pretty bleak on all fronts at the moment, and that's why it makes it so unusual and so difficult for the Prime Minister. So financial competence is the absolute basic requirement, and he's got it.
Anthony, I just have to check, that's not you tinkling the ivories whilst talking to Sky News, is it? I mean, it's certainly an appropriate soundtrack for what's going on at the moment. No, can you still hear me, Sir Anthony? Over the piano music?
Yes.
Good.
Here I am at Eurostar, not fleeing the country, but a disobliging pianist is tinkling the ivories. providing a dramatic backdrop to this most dramatic moment in history.
Who doesn't want a bit of honky-tonk whilst we're talking big political matters? So tell us exactly what happens today. Liz Truss, we're expecting to leave here around about 10:15 after speaking. So what actually happens behind those closed doors at the palace?
Well, the civil servants already will have a whole series of briefs, and Rishi Sunak will be greeted by the Cabinet Secretary, Simon Case, who's also head of the civil service, and he will offer advice to the Prime Minister about the need for probity, ethical behaviour, which is all important considering what's happened about he'll have an intelligence briefing immediately about imminent threats to the country. He'll have to sign the letters write the letters of last resort about, in the event of a nuclear strike, what would he recommend the submarine commanders with the nuclear weapons to do? That's normally been something of which seemed like a far distance away, but now because of Vladimir Putin, the risk of nuclear war becomes higher, and he will start addressing himself. And after a long period in which the civil service has been marginalised in Downing Street, the civil service, which has steered every single successful Prime Minister in our history to sensible conclusions by giving them the options for them to decide, they will already have a whole series of briefs and presentations to Mr. Sunak to consider. And of course, although he's been Chancellor, he's never been Prime Minister, and nothing anywhere in government prepares you for the massive step up. It's like moving from the second floor of a building up to the 25th floor. Everything looks very, very different. And you need a capacious mind and a great deal of calm, which I think Mr. Sunak certainly has.
Do you think he's up to it then?
Look, nobody ever knows if a Prime Minister will be up to it until the moment that they take over, because it's so unlike any other job in government. Home Secretary, Foreign Secretary, Chancellor of the Exchequer, even Leader of the Opposition, which he hasn't been. But the indications are that he's got skills in the very area that is most going to be in demand. And let's face it, there's very little the Conservatives can do in the 2 years, if it is 2 years till the next general election. Just calm competence, getting the ship of state and the economy back on a course, competence in the health service, wisdom with strength abroad, rebuilding relationships with the EU, sorting out Northern Ireland. If the incoming Prime Minister and their team can do that, that will be a very great tick for them. But imagining they're going to come in with a big new philosophy is pie in the sky. There's no time, there's no opportunity for new directions now.
Sir Anthony, I think we can both agree that one piece of legislation that needs to be passed immediately is to outlaw pianos in train stations. Sir Anthony Selden, thank you very much for your time. We'll see you again soon.
Top of the agenda.
Stick with us here on Sky News. We will, of course, be here in Downing Street throughout the day. In terms of what we're about to see, well, Liz Truss will be leaving number 10. Rishi Sunak will be arriving. See you next time.